Over and over I hear from you guys that you like coming to this channel because I speak about fragrances not a lot of people speak about. Well, today I've got 15 underrated spring and summer fragrances. Some are more intense than others, probably more appropriate for cooler days, and some are definitely very, very fresh, appropriate for the hot days. But 15 awesome, underrated, totally underrated spring summer fragrances coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian. Yesterday I'm talking about spring and summer fragrances that not a lot of people talk about. Although you might have heard some of these or heard about some of these, or maybe you saw and didn't even look up or sample or anything like that, but I think they're definitely worth noting and discovering if you haven't already. So I'm going to let you know about these fragrances, but as always, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure to subscribe by clicking the subscribe button below, and also click the bell so that you'll be notified for future videos and giveaways. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go right to a house called La Parfumerie Moderne. They have a fragrance called No Sport, this one right here. Anybody familiar with this one? So this is a really gorgeous, sort of fresh take on rose and a very, very green and aromatic experience. Less on the citruses because there's not a lot of citrusy touches, and this one actually probably is more for the cooler days in spring and summer because it does have some substance and some depth. So I think it has great longevity and things like that. But it's a rose fragrance that has lots of aromatics, as I was saying. It's got rose, geranium, hay, patchouli, vetiver, tobacco, almonds, and galbanum. So this is a house that a lot of people talk about, and I don't know what's going on with their distribution here in the States, but if you can get a bottle, definitely do, especially if you like rose. And I feel like also this particular rose fragrance, No Sport, I love the name No Sport, is definitely a very masculine take on rose. So No Sport from the house of La Parfumerie Moderne is the first fragrance I'm starting off the list with. This is an unranked list. Moving on to the house of MICALLEF. This is OSAITO. I've got several aquatic marine leaning fragrances. This is the first one of them. And this is actually a surprise with this particular fragrance. I'm not the biggest fan of marine notes, but I'm really opening up to them a lot more and appreciating them and enjoying them. This particular fragrance, OSAITO from MICALLEF, features Myrtle. Myrtle as a note. This kind of aromatic, green, floral kind of a fragrance. Probably best known in a fragrance from Acqua di Parma called Myrtle de Panarea, but it's definitely here full on. In your face Myrtle with marine notes, some citruses, grapefruit, marigold, musk, woods, sandalwood, and amber. Once again, this is a fragrance that has some depth, some substance, so probably for the cooler days in the spring and summer, but you can get away with it in the heat as well. I think it's a great fragrance, unique kind of a fragrance, utilizing that myrtle note that's really, really great kind of bitter, green, aromatic, herbal, floral kind of an experience that is very, very unique in this particular fragrance. So OSAITO from the house of MICALLEF, a great fragrance. Moving on to the house of Parfum d'Empire. This is MAL-AIME. So I don't know if you guys know this one. It's a great fragrance, but kind of avant-garde, maybe a little from the left field, not necessarily something that most people talk about, and it features notes that are different, that they're not really common notes. That's what I like about it. It's a very green fragrance, and also kind of like an overgrowth of greens in a farm or a barn where it's like lush greens everywhere, and you're smelling the pungent smell of the greens kind of a thing. Definitely a spring-summer fragrance, although you can wear any of these fragrances all year round, but MAL-AIME features notes of Nettle, Thistle, Blackberry, Orris, Fleabane, which is a type of daisy. Very unique notes, right? Not common notes that you see in fragrances, and actually this brand is also very, very underrated, but I really love the fragrances they do here. And even though I haven't really explored the brand, I have a favorite from this house, Ambre Rousse. I'm really going to dig into this house very, very soon and start digging into their fragrances because they do really, really great fragrances. And the perfumer for this brand is Marc-Antoine Corticchiato. He also created the fragrance here, No Sport, for La Parfumerie Moderne. So MAL-AIME, check that out if you don't know it. I think it's a great and very, very unique fragrance. Alright, moving on to the house of NILAFAR du Nil. This is Jardins de la Bergamot. I first did a video on this house of 4 fragrances I think that were great that I had selected to review. This is one of the ones that I thought was perfect for warm days, and this is definitely on the very, very fresh side. And the name Jardins de la Bergamot, meaning basically bergamot garden. So I love this note. Not only is it used in top notes in a lot of fragrances, but it's also used as a main note, and this is the focus note here. And it's a really, really delicious take on bergamot. It's very, very fresh, sparkling, invigorating, just like citruses come to life kind of an experience. It features notes of bergamot, neroli, lime, petitgrain, grapefruit, musk, ambroxan, vetiver. So it's a very juicy experience. If you like the idea of juicy, drippy citruses in a fragrance with the flowers of the citruses and, you know, the leaves as well, this is definitely one for you to try. And guess what? This is now selling at Lucky Scent. Lucky Scent has taken on the brand NILAFAR du Nil, so you can definitely go check the brand out and discover some of their fragrances. So anyway, Jardins de la Bergamote, a great fragrance that you should check out. That's pretty underrated for a spring and summer fragrance. So I'm featuring this particular fragrance as a spring summer fragrance, and I think it's one of the best fragrances from this house. And the reason I'm doing that is because it features a very prominent Yuzu note. I'm talking about the house Zoologist Perfumes and MACAQUE Yuzu edition. It's a great fragrance. Very sparkly Yuzu, kind of bitter, kind of tart, kind of zingy. And then you've got that Olibanum note, kind of incensey note thrown in there with the Hinoki wood. Maybe it's a little strong, but I don't think so. I think you can totally liberally wear this when it's really warm outside. I think that Yuzu is so bright and so fresh that I think everything else can, you know, that comes after it will be at a time when the fragrance is kind of like, you know, drying down and things like that and going on to the stages of heart notes and base notes. But a wonderful creation here, reminiscent of some fragrances by Aesop and Comme des Garçons, but this is definitely a fresh take on those kind of Hinoki focused fragrances. But MACAQUE Yuzu edition features notes of Hinoki wood, Yuzu, Olibanum, Myrrh, juniper berries, sandalwood, oak moss. Yeah, it does have some depth, but for me, I get a lot of Yuzu in comparison to a lot of the other notes. So I feel like it's a totally fresh take on this particular style of fragrance. Anyway, MACAQUE Yuzu edition, great fragrance from Zoologist Perfumes. And then going to the house of obvious parfums, it's Un Vervain. This one right here. This is verbenas come to life. If you guys don't know what verbenas are, lemon verbena is an herb, but it has that kind of lemony astringency that's very unique. So you've got this lemoniness from an herb that's kind of aromatic and citrusy at the same time. Very unique note, and here they've captured it so perfectly. Absolutely love it. It's like just great, very fresh and very invigorating aromatic citrus experience. Citrus aromatic is what I should say. It's featuring notes of verbena, ginger, galbanum, vetiver, lemons, cardamom, juniper berry, armoise, habanolide. A lot of different notes, very unique notes, but really wears beautifully. I think it's a great spring summer fragrance. It's an underrated house. I don't know if you guys know about Obvious Parfums. They do definitely have some really great offerings, and this is definitely one of their latest releases. Although they do have a fig coming out, but this one came out last, and I think it's really great, and I think it's going to be perfect in the heat. So Un Vervain from the house of Obvious Parfums. This one might be more familiar. This is from the house of Gallagher fragrances. It's Eau Verte. I really like this one. Very tart, juicy, kind of sour, a little astringent, but still floral kind of a take on citruses. It's just beautiful, and I think it's definitely one you can totally liberally spray in the summertime. It does also have some depth for a fresh fragrance, which is another reason why I like it. But Eau Verte features lemons, mandarin, cardamom, sea salt, vetiver, musk. I mean, starting to enjoy the idea of sea salt in fragrances, or just salt in fragrances, because it kind of tones down the sharpness of some citrusy notes or whatever other note that is in there. So it kind of has this toning down effect, and it definitely has that here. You know, sometimes you add salt in cooking like cakes and cookies and things like that, so it makes sense in also perfume. So Eau Verte, a great fragrance from the house of Gallagher fragrances. And as I said, that one's probably not as underrated, but I definitely think it deserves the attention if you don't know about it. Moving on to the house of Le Galion, it's Cologne Nocturne. Here we're going to an aromatic direction with kind of this idea of a little bit of a barbershop-y style, but more, you know, focusing on lots of aromatics, but with citruses as well. So it does have that kind of like classic smelling signature kind of a smell, but one that actually really smells great when it's warm outside. But it is very aromatic with loads of lavender. In addition to that, there's bergamot, lemon, rosewood, clary sage, rosemary, thyme, spices, woods, cedar, and patchouli. So lots of aromatics. The herbs, it's herbal, and also lots of spices with woods and earthy patchouli. Really great. And then then I forgot to mention citruses again, but yeah, this is lots of citruses as well. So Cologne Nocturne from the house of Le Galion. Let me know if you know that fragrance and that brand. So moving on to the house of Parfums de Nicolai, it's Cap Neroli. I have a full review of this fragrance on the channel. You can go catch it. It was, in fact, I did the review from a little bottle. Recently, I bought another bottle from ZGO Perfumerie here in San Francisco because I actually really like this one. I like that it's neroli focused, an overdose of neroli, but there's something under there that has a kind of a classic chypre-like quality to it that really is exciting to me. I like classic fragrances. I grew up with them, so I kind of have a big admiration for them. But Cap Neroli is neroli, petitgrain, orange blossom, rosemary, orange, mint, mandarin orange, bergamot, jasmine, and oak moss. I think it's the oak moss that's in here that kind of has this kind of classic characteristic, and so even though it's like very fresh, invigorating, and sparkling neroli, petitgrain, citrus fragrance, but that oak moss I think gives me a little bit of a classic undertone, which I quite like. So Cap Neroli from the house of Parfums de Nicolai is a great fragrance. And moving on from citruses, we're going to go to something very ozonic next. Going to the house of Juicebox, it's Feel and Chill. So this is a fig fragrance, and also it's a watermelon fragrance. So there's this fruity, ozonic, watery touch about this one. A little marine-esque, because watermelon can take on a kind of a light marine type of quality to it, although it also takes on kind of an ozonic quality about it as well. But with the watermelon, you have the fig leaf, so it's green, a little bitter. You've got coconuts, which is kind of a lightly beachy. Then throw in some pine needles, cardamom, bergamot, musk, vetiver, and amber for a very unique fresh fragrance experience, but with some depth, and I think it's perfect for spring and summer. Not many people talk about this one. I think it's definitely a quality release, and I think it's created by Dominique Ropion. So Feel and Chill, a great fragrance, and definitely you'll feel chill when you wear that fragrance. Moving on to the house of La Parfums de Rosine, it's Blue Abyss, another marine fragrance that has grown on me quite a bit. But once again, this is kind of a deeper marine fragrance. And also, the thing with this particular fragrance is La Parfums de Rosine uses roses in all of their fragrances. So this is a minerally marine fragrance with roses, and it smells really great. A wonderful job is done with this particular fragrance, but it features notes of mineral notes, rose, elemi, resin, bergamot, cassis, algae, vetiver, patchouli, oud, and incense. I like it. I really do. And I had a challenging time with marine notes before because they smelled a little sulfuric and fishy to me. But this one, I think that rose kind of covers it up. So you have a little bit of it there, you know, it teases, but then again you have all this other stuff happening along with the rose. So Le Parfum de Rosine, and it's Blue Abyss, a great fragrance. Definitely check that out. Moving on to the house of Les Indomables, it's Chypre Azural. It's a Chypre style fragrance, but totally citrus, and a unique take on citrus because it has tarragon. Tarragon is an herb, an aromatic that doesn't come up frequently in fragrances. Here it's a very unique smell and combination with the citruses. So it's oranges, lots of them, with tarragon. There's patchouli, there's a little rose, and there's a little amber in here as well. So it definitely has a kind of a Chypre-like quality to it. Obviously it's called Chypre Azural, and it's really great. It does have some depth to it, but it is definitely on the fresh side, so wear this one liberally when it's really warm outside, or you know, however you want to experience it throughout the rest of the year. But a really great fragrance, Chypre Azural from the house of Les Indomables. So moving on to another salty fragrance, we're going to the house of BDK Parfums. This is Celle d'Argent, this one right here. So this one is, you know, the more I smell this, like when I first started wearing, but when I first start smelling a fragrance, it's the first initial reaction. Sometimes they're not as positive as when it's kind of I've gotten used to it. And marine notes, as I said, are pretty challenging to me. This one, I don't know if it's necessarily a marine style fragrance. It does have like marine qualities there, and I think it's coming from the salt. It's definitely a very super fragrance experience, Celle d'Argent. So it has loads of salt with orange blossom, grapefruit, ylang ylang. There's also galbanum, bergamot, ambroxan, ISOE super, white musk, and cashmeran. So, you know, when I'm wearing it, there's a beachy undertone, and even though there's really no mention of any beachy notes except for that salt. So whatever they've put in here to combine together to create kind of like a lightly salty, beachy kind of citrus experience. Musky as well, lots of musk here, as they have the white musk along with the ambroxan and ISOE super and the cashmeran. So there's lots of musk here along with those other notes. So I think it's a great fragrance. It is a little deeper and more intense than your typical summer fragrance, but you can totally wear it. Celle d'Argent from the house of BDK, a great fragrance. Moving on to the house of Carthusia, this is Essence of the Park. Do you know this particular fragrance or house? This is a very unique take on Artemisia. It's a great smell. It's kind of licoricey, green for sure, a little boozy, but very, very herbal and aromatic, and that's what the focus note is here. But it does also feature floral notes of magnolia, linden blossom, and honeysuckle. So it's a very, very kind of like park come to life, and it's very, very fresh. So this particular fragrance I think is perfect for when it's really, really warm outside. And if you like the idea of a park, the trees, the flowers, the the earth and the grass and things like that, definitely check this one out. Essence of the Park from the house of Carthusia. And then finally, the last fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is from the house of Maison Crivelli. It's Absinthe Boreal. Do you guys know this one? Recent falling in love with this one because sometimes fragrances don't jump out at me initial spray, then I come back to it and it's like you found a new love for it or something. And here I started noticing that there's a kind of a creamy, foamy, like shaving cream like quality here, like out of a can, There's definitely like a foaminess, so it kind of takes on a characteristic of like a barbershop-y kind of fragrance, which I quite like. But Absinthe Boreal features notes of lavender, and once again we've got Artemisia, we've got rosemary, clary sage, we've got balsam fir, thyme, eucalyptus, oak moss, and geranium. And I think it's the oak moss that kind of has this like mossy kind of foamy characteristic in fragrances, and that's what's causing this like shaving cream like quality. Yeah, it's a little bit of a fougere like experience, but it's kind of a very frosty, clean, fresh experience. It is unisex targeted, and I think it leans a little masculine, but I think women can totally pull this one off. But it smells really, really great, and I think it's a perfect fragrance to wear in the spring and summer. So Absinthe Boreal is the last and final fragrance to talk about today in these underrated spring summer fragrances list. But let me know your thoughts on these fragrances. Are you fans of these fragrances? And also let me know, do you have an underrated spring summer fragrance that you would recommend that I haven't spoken about on the channel? Please put a comment down so I can find out. Either way, guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye. I wanted to offer up one more bonus fragrance. It's not necessarily, it's underrated. It just came out and I wanted to highlight it as a great, fragrance to wear in the spring and summer. This is from the house of Juliet Has a Gun. It's Magnolia Bliss. This is more of a fruity floral take and also a musky take, and it also does lean a little feminine, but definitely check it out and smell it and see if you like fruity tart kind of fruity experiences with like floral touch and musks and citruses. I think you'll be pleasantly happy with this one. But Magnolia Bliss features notes of magnolia, mirabelle plums, bergamot, musks, and ambroxan. A great fragrance. I really like it, and I think this one in the heat it'll be perfect because it's that kind of tart kind of experience, fruity, lots of fruitiness from the mirabelle plum, a plum that I really like to enjoy eating but rarely can find unless I find the tree. And they've captured it here with its whole entire experience of its tartness. Anyway, Juliet Has a Gun, Magnolia Bliss is the bonus fragrance for you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Have a good one. Bye-bye.